Good morning. Good morning. I'm David Green, and this is the Pastor Abilities podcast. It's also being put out on Life and Faith Together. So I'm so grateful that you guys are with me today. This is the final of the series, 5-part series of Advent. It is time for Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. Oh my goodness, we've been working on this, talking about it since July. So it's a little bit surprising every year that Christmas finally gets here after all that preparation and planning. Today, what we're going to do is take a look at the text for Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, a text from the Gospel of Matthew, one near and dear to my heart. And we will also be setting up the stage for what we'll be doing the next couple of weeks. So let me kind of bring you back up to date, remind you where we are and where we're headed. So, wrong one. Here we go. This is the Advent schedule. So there are two ways to look at where we are right now. We have 4 Sundays of Advent and Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, depending on your local congregation. But it's Christmas time. And so the first 4 Sundays of Advent, we had, excuse me, my little clock was 2 minutes late telling me to start the podcast or to start the broadcast here, live feed. But the 4 Sundays of Advent, we have followed themes from Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol and looked at biblical texts that are related-ish to it or related adjacent. I don't know. But those are the themes. And the idea here is this gives us a time to sing the classic old Victorian era hymns, which are many of the classic Christmas songs that we love and are very near and dear to our heart. So we had Marley's Ghost. This is the story in Dickens where Marley's ghost comes and warns Ebenezer Scrooge that humanity is their work, not the business that they've been attending to, and that Scrooge needs to change his ways, and that he'd be visited by 3 other spirits that night. And those are the spirits of Christmas past, Christmas present, and Christmas is yet to come. And you can see in the list of services that I have for Advent that we also included another service that we called Service of Comfort and Joy. And that was very much specialized, focused service. We held it in the chapel for people who are grieving. And the holiday season, oh my goodness, the holiday season just really can bring that grief out of a fair number of individuals. And my local congregation celebrates Christmas Eve. That's the First Presbyterian Church in Huntsville, Texas. You can find a live feed of our service Christmas Eve at 6 p.m. We do an evening service on Christmas Eve. So we're at the end of that 5-week series. Or for those who follow the liturgical calendar more correctly than what I do, Christmas Eve is not a celebration of Advent. It is the celebration of Christmas. And so we have Christmas and 2 Sundays following Christmas. That's the way the calendar lands. Now, this is a little bit of a challenge for clergy and church leaders because the Christmas celebration begins Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and then there are 12 days of Christmas, which go all the way through into January. But by the time we get to December 26th, our people are done with Christmas. They have been there, done that. They've been seeing the ads since Labor Day, and they're ready to move on. And yet, this is a time that we need to stop and acknowledge that this is the season where we celebrate that the Christ child has come. And if we skip over this, the rest of the year really will not make as much sense. So what I have on the calendar for my preaching and teaching is Christmas Eve and then 2 Sundays after Christmas. Text from Matthew chapter 2 and text from Isaiah next Sunday, the 28th. And I call that looking back, stepping forward. That's a common theme that I'll use that Sunday between Christmas and New Year's. And then the Sunday after that, where it's a communion Sunday for us, and I speak of Christmas presents, ENCE, where, okay, now we're in the new year. Now what? Now what are we going to do? And that's the text, a great text from the Gospel of John, chapter 1. We'll get there when we get there. So here we are now. I do this broadcast live Tuesday mornings. I'm in Texas. That's Central Time in the United States. And I start at 7:30 in the morning. Now, next week, I'm not going to do a Bible study, and I'm not doing a study this week on the text for Sunday morning. For me, that's really going to be Christmas reflections. I've let the congregation know something fun. I'm going to tell my very, 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 very favorite Christmas story on Sunday morning. And I'm also going to tell the single most embarrassing moment I have ever had as a pastor. It was a humdinger. There was no way to hide the mistake. In fact, I was the only one in the room that took a second to figure out what I had done. And I'm going to tell that story on Sunday morning. So I guess you have to come to church on Sunday to find it. But that's going to be a more casual service in its nature. I will probably throw in an extra hymn or two. We'll see how the order of worship pans out later this afternoon, but because we're printing a day early this week. So today is actually our print day for Christmas Eve and next Sunday morning. And so this is what I'm doing. So next Tuesday, here's what we'll do. We're not going to have a Bible study or a review of a text for Sunday morning or a text for teaching, but we're going to take a look at the process of choosing sermon text and titles for a season. And I'm going to lay out the groundwork and share some resources, some that I find online and some that I prepare myself, and that'll all be made available to you absolutely free of charge. As it is right now, my website does not even ask an email address of you to get the free resources. That will change in the next couple of months, but be that as it may, right now, that's what I got. So that's what we'll do next Tuesday. We'll take a look at the process of planning, selecting sermon texts and titles, and we're going to try to do that all the way through Easter and in less than an hour. So that may or may not be super helpful to you. If you are a Bible teacher or a Bible preacher, that is absolutely essential. And that will show up on Facebook and on Pastor Ability's YouTube channel and podcast. So, but that won't show up on Life and Faith Together. This one's really targeting church leaders, preachers, teachers. So that's what we're going to do next Sunday morning. Today, what I have for you is just one of the coolest things. Just realizing I wanted to bring something with me that I didn't bring, but life moves on. So here's one of the coolest texts in all of the Bible. This particular Bible is the English Standard Version, and the editors give it the headline, "The Visit of the Wise Men." Were they? We're going to find out what was happening there. And fair warning, this is a text that I had the privilege of writing a master's thesis on decades ago in the mid or late 1990s. It was 1998 that I completed that master's degree, that my second of my master's degrees. And I got to write this paper for a very famous, very accomplished New Testament writer named Jack Kingsbury. Dr. Kingsbury literally changed the shape of biblical studies in the late 1960s with a booklet he published. And I call it a booklet. It's not a very long book. It's called Matthew as Story. This is an important setup for where we are today in Matthew's Gospel. Dr. Kingsbury was the first of the academics to do the obvious, to take a look at the Gospel accounts and say, the Gospel of Matthew is written in the form of a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And where you are in those three different segments, the presentation of Jesus, the earthly ministry of Jesus, and the journey towards Jerusalem, which includes the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. Those are the three different segments. And in chapter 4, you find from that time forward, he began to, that's beginning the earthly ministry. And then in chapter 16, I think it's verse 21, you again see that phrase repeated. From that time forward, he turned his face towards Jerusalem. But from that time forward, gives you clear segments that you finished the presentation of Jesus, entered the earthly ministry, that you finished the earthly ministry, and now entered into it, the journey towards Jerusalem. And so that's where Dr. Kingsbury really changed. Really, a lot of New Testament scholars got turned on their axis because they were digging so deep with such a fine-tooth comb, they had missed the point of the story altogether. Now, for those who teach the Bible in churches, you probably never forgot that or never thought of it differently, but that was a significant change. And so that opened up a whole new school of thought and study in New Testament studies, the narrative critical study of the text. And that, by the way, I studied with Dr. Kingsbury, but that would be a fair description of where I was before I met him. It is most certainly 30 years after I studied with him still very much how I approach the text. I just want people to connect with the text. It's not, I mean, I do believe these things happen. I absolutely do believe them. And I think, honestly, it takes a whole lot more faith to deny the laws of physics in the consistency with the Word of God. It takes a lot more faith to be an atheist than it takes to be a Christian. But to each our own. My job is to proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ. So anyway, this is where we are, Matthew chapter 2. Now, here's how Matthew gets to where we are. And I'm going to back up, back. And we're going to give kind of a quick run through here. Now, Gospel of Matthew, chapter 1, verse 1. Let me clear out a little bit of clutter on my screen that y'all don't see. The book of the genealogy of Jesus, Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. That's the first sentence. And the book of genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham, I think could also be the book of the beginning. I mean, we do have a genealogy here, and the genealogy is not in perfect consistency with what you'll read in the Old Testament texts or the Hebrew manuscripts. It's just not, and it's not intended to be. But it is intended to make the point that Jesus is the Messiah, the son of David, and the son of Abraham. And you get that right here out of the first sentence. Boom, this is the presentation of Jesus. This is the book of the beginning, the book of the genealogy of Jesus, Messiah, the son of David, son of Abraham. And you begin with Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers. You get down to verse 5. And Solomon was the father of Boaz by Rahab. Boaz was the father of Obed by Ruth. Obed was the father of Jesse. Jesse was the father of David, the king. Boom, there's Jesus, Messiah, son of Abraham and son of David. Now you've gone from son of Abraham. Abraham is the father that leads to David. And I've highlighted a couple of names there because those names are not names you expect to find in the genealogy of the king of Israel. A prostitute who helped Rahab, who helped a military victory. Ruth, who was a Moabite woman. And boom, Jesse, the father of David, the king. Or make sure it's not any other David. Then you get on to the next middle of that verse. David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah. We're not using the name Bathsheba. David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah. This is the story that tells us that David was an adulterer. David and Bathsheba both were adulterers. Go back and read that text. In the spring of the year, in the time when kings went with their people, with their men into war, King David was at the palace. He was not where he belonged when he was supposed to be there. By the way, neither was Bathsheba. Her husband was at war, and she does a purification ritual in full sight of the king. The purification ritual is normally done in an enclosed space, women only, but she chooses to do it in full view of the king while he's standing on his rooftop. Neither David nor Bathsheba were where they belong or doing what they were supposed to be doing. Long way around there, but I think it's important because this is to tell us that the lineage of Jesus reflects the real world. It reflects the real world. Abraham and the generations after him, they were messed up. They were absolutely as human as we are today. King David and the birth of his first child, who was the king to come after him, came out of an adulterous relationship for which he murdered the wife's just husband. The Bible tells the story of God and of salvation. Certainly the Gospel of Matthew does. And that story fits in our world because it's not from the holiest of the holy. It is, but they're not holy because they were holy. They're holy because God has blessed them. Very important for us to remember. Now, this genealogy from David coming forward, you go down to, we'll pick up at verse 11, Josiah, the father of Jeconiah and his brothers, at the time of the deportation to Babylon. Boom. That's incredibly important because people are carried off to Babylon. The Babylonians conquered by the Persians. And you're not going to hear of Jews in Jerusalem for a number of centuries. They're there, but they are not prosperous. They're not thriving. They come together and begin to thrive. And we know that because within the century, really within the 75 years or so before the birth of the Christ child, Jewish history in Jerusalem and Roman history out of Rome, the Roman Empire, these are going to intersect. And at that intersection is where these events are going to take place. So the deportation to Babylon is very important because it changes the nature of Jerusalem and is a significant event in the history of these individuals. Then from after the deportation to Babylon, you have Jeconiah, the father of Shealtiel, ... Jacob was the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom Jesus was born, who is called Messiah. Messiah is the Hebrew word. Christ is the Greek word. I'm using Messiah here because I want to pick I want to trigger that moment in your brain that says this is the Messiah, the one predicted from generations before. Now, in this first century before, 50 years before to 50 years after the birth of the Christ child, including that time of his birth, life, crucifixion, and resurrection. Greek is the dominant language, not Hebrew. Greek is the dominant language. The texts that are now part of the Hebrew Bible were collected and gathered together in Greek. It's called the Septuagint. It is it's really cool to be able to go back and read that and use that as a resource. Tells us a great deal. I've spoken before here about the expectation that it be a virgin who give birth. We know that because the Septuagint says in Isaiah, behold the virgin, the virgin. That's the expectation of the rabbis in the era in which the Christ child was born. That's important for today also. Verse 17, so all the generations from Abraham to David were 14 generations, from David to the deportation to Babylon, 14 generations from the deportation to Babylon to the Christ, 14 generations. The numbers are important, but I'm not going down that rabbit trail today because then we would have no time for today's text. But what I want you to see is from the beginning of Matthew's gospel, back, the book of the genealogy of Jesus Messiah, son of David, son of Abraham. This is to say clearly that this, the Messiah, was born at that perfect moment in the history of time. This, the Messiah, is the one who was predicted by the prophets for generations before. This is the Messiah, the holy anointed one of God who has come to save his people. But the expectation outside of the Hebrew scriptures, it's corrupted. And they expect a military king. They expect something of the Messiah imposed by the world, not foretold by the prophets. And that sets up the life of Jesus in Matthew's gospel. This is the very beginning of the presentation of Jesus. And then we come forward. I'm going to skip over a little bit of this. There's the birth that took place. Mary, his mother, had been betrothed. There's a big ceremony around the engagement. An angel appears to her. Do not fear to tell her that she is pregnant from the Holy Spirit. Her husband Joseph, being a just man, Joseph knows they did not do the thing that gets you pregnant, and he is a just man. He is not having sex with his fiancée before marriage. Very important little side story there of how that is of biblical value for us. It's just put right out there. But unwilling to put her to shame. He loves her. He's not going to put her to shame. He's going to divorce her quietly, step away. He is heartbroken about this. An angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream. Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid. Do not fear. Do not even begin to be afraid to take Mary as your wife. That which is in her is conceived from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son. You will call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. The root word in the Hebrew name Jesus is saving, salvation, will be saved. So that's why he's called Jesus. He is Emmanuel, God with us. He is called Jesus because he's here to save us. And then you get the confirmation that this is the prophecy. Joseph, again, a righteous man. When he woke from his sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took his wife. He married her. but he did not have intimacy with her. He did not have sexual relationship with her until after she had given birth to a son, and Joseph called that boy's name Jesus. We know from now the genealogy that Joseph is not the biological dad of this child. And we know now from the birth narrative here that Joseph is not the biological father of this child. Joseph adopts this child as his own, and he will be seen throughout the gospel narratives as the son of Mary and Joseph. Those around them will see him as the child born to Mary and Joseph. They will be unable to see, often completely unable to see, that he is also Messiah, the Christ, the holy anointed one of God. Tells us a lot about Mary and Joseph were real people living in a real community with real people. Some got it and some didn't. But now, here's the presentation of the Christ child. Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, magi from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw him in his star when it rose, and we have come to worship him." When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. Stop right here, and we're going to take a look at what happens in these few verses. It's a lot. Okay. We've been given now Luke last week or earlier in the Advent series, I talked about the Gospel of Luke giving us strong indicators of when this happened by naming a whole bunch of leaders, political leaders, religious leaders. It creates an indisputable window of time when these events would have occurred. And Luke gives us a very clear place, including Bethlehem, Jerusalem and Bethlehem. Jerusalem and Bethlehem. Now, Bethlehem's not far from Jerusalem. It's I've heard it said it's 5 miles to the south. I would have guessed it to be a little bit farther, but it is true that from the gates entering Bethlehem, you can see Jerusalem. I say from the gates entering Bethlehem, you can see Jerusalem, and up on the hilltop, some of the hills you can as well. I say that because Bethlehem is in Israel, but it's in an area of Israel designated as the Palestinian territory. And so there is a Palestinian leadership team that is leading in this Palestinian territory, and that goes all the way to the west bank of the Jordan River. From just outside of Jerusalem to the Jordan River is Palestinian territory. And it is walled off for the safety of everybody. It is walled off. And you go through checkpoints going in and you go through checkpoints going out. And whether you're going in, Palestinian, take a look at the bus that you're on or the car that you're in. They're going to check your ID, make sure you're good to go. Likewise, coming out, you're going to have the Jewish, the Israeli authorities checking out your bus, your visas, and so forth, clearing you to go back into Israel proper. And I tell you that because when you cross through that wall, the Muslim community in Israel, the Muslim community does not care for its grounds as well as, or in the same way as the Jewish community. In Muslim communities, people will open something and they'll just drop the trash on the ground. They just have no concern. And when you cross through that border, the first thing you see after you get through that concrete wall, which is significant, is the trash is everywhere. There's trash everywhere on the ground, blown by the wind into the trees. It is everywhere. It is not clean. It is not as clean. You're in a desert. Nothing's clean. But it's a mess. The next thing I will tell you is that it's beautiful in the sense at the same time. There are beautiful monuments and sanctuaries built. Go online and see them. The very, very famous Shrine of the Nativity. It is shared by multiple faith groups. 4 groups in all have worship services and will say Mass. I was there a few years ago in October, and it was fascinating to see because There's Greek Orthodox, there's Roman Catholic, there's Eastern Orthodox. I'm sorry, I forget what the other group is that's in there. And they have a tight schedule for when they each say Mass. And one of the groups was running late. And the people from the next group up were coming, encouraging them to hurry it along. You didn't have to speak Hebrew to understand the conversation that they were having here. It was pretty clear. These guys waiting their turn were very upset about being delayed. And I mean, honestly and truly, I thought it was going to come to a fist fight. These men were not. The group currently leading the Mass was not going to stop for anything. They were not going to be rushed, and the group waiting their turn was not going to be delayed. You're standing in a long line. The Mass is being said. There's all kinds of chaos happening in the room simultaneously. It really is a very cool experience. It's also the place where you have to duck down, even if you are not very tall in stature. You must duck down to enter in, and there's something moving about ducking down and entering into this beautiful sanctuary. And then you go and you can see the place where the child was born. It's not outdoors in a barn under something resembling a carport with a thatch roof. It's different than that, but this is Bethlehem today, and it's a shared piece among different faith traditions, and it's tenuous, but it gives you a sense of the different communities that value the birth of the Christ child. I will also tell you that Bethlehem has a small group of Christians in it, and in Palestinian territory, Christians are very often, and from what I am told by people who live there, typically Christians are banned from having paid employment because the Muslim community wants them to convert to the Muslim faith. And many do, because if you live there, it's hard to get permits to live and work outside of the Palestinian territory. It's hard to get through there, but you got to feed your family. And some families will convert to the Islamic faith so that they can have work. There is a jewelry store and a wood carving store there, very famous. It's kind of a fun experience, but it's also it's very expensive. They know what they're doing. They'll tell you everybody gets 10% off. All prices are negotiable. So what's 10% off of what? But it is also very beautiful. The Christians do wood carvings of the Nativity. So they do these very beautiful wood carvings out of olive wood. Some of them are tens of thousands of dollars and worth every penny of it for those who can afford it. I have a beautiful statue carved of the Good Shepherd. I have a beautiful nativity scene, a small nativity scene that was carved in a piece of jewelry I bought from my sweet bride. It is worth going if ever you have the chance. But you get a sense there of how close Bethlehem is to Jerusalem, because you can see Jerusalem from Bethlehem. You can see the old city from Bethlehem. So 5, 7, 10 miles, I don't know. But you can see Jerusalem from Bethlehem. Bethlehem then and now is a much smaller town than Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem it's a pretty good sized cosmopolitan city. Not an airport there. You fly into Tel Aviv, in and out of Tel Aviv. That's the international flights. But now Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea. That's the region of Judea. It's in the days of Herod the king. And now what happens? Behold, idu in the Greek. Y'all watch. And when I see that, that's a cue for God is taking action. So from the east came to Jerusalem. Okay. So who came from the east? If you go to your Bible dictionaries, they're going to tell you that these were wise men, these were astrologers, astronomers, they were kings, they don't know who they were. The truth is we get a plural word here, magos, magoi, and it's from the singular word, magos. And as I researched that term, and I did a pretty deep dive on it, I learned fascinating things. What we know about that word, we don't know what it means, but we know that at its root, it's a Phoenician word. Okay, remember back in chapter 1 when we had the deportation to Babylon, Later, the Babylonians are conquered by Phoenicians. This is 400 years later that the birth of the Christ child is taking place. But we know this word is attested in those Phoenician and Assyrian records. I also suspect, as early as the time of Matthew's gospel, the meaning of that word was lost to antiquity. Now, Matthew surely had an idea of what it meant. We derive the meaning of this from how they got to Jerusalem. They're wise men because wise men still seek him. So they're wise men. They follow the stars. So they are following astronomy. Some would say astrologers. I don't buy that for a moment, but they're following the stars. And one of the coolest videos, it's out there if you can find it. It's thebethlehemstar.net is the website. There's a video called The Bethlehem Star put together by a man who is a lawyer that he tells the story in the video. He becomes curious about the Bethlehem Star. He uses software developed by NASA to go back in time and see what they saw. They saw his star, and this is my more precise translation. Behold, magi from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who's been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in its rising. Very important. So that's some 900 miles away from Jerusalem. We don't know how many. We have that great hymn, We Three Kings of Orient Are. I encourage y'all to sing at least a little bit of it. It does get long, but if you have three men who can carry those three middle verses as solos, God bless you and your choir. But that's why we get the idea there were three wise men. And then there are traditions that give them names, and there's this whole narrative wrapped around these individuals. The truth is we don't know. We know where they came from, ish. We know about where they came from. We know they saw something in the sky, and that because they traveled some 900 miles, that it took place over time. And the Jerusalem Star gives very fascinating ideas about what happened. And it is true that in cities, like I live outside of Houston, you don't see stars very well. For our honeymoon, my sweet bride and I traveled to the Grand Canyon. There was a meteor shower going on. And I remember the two of us sitting on the hood of the car, leaning back against the windshield, looking up into the sky without city lights around us and being able to see the stars and the meteorites as they came by. And it was so cool. It was, what a great way to start our married life together. I also know from an experience in 2008 after Hurricane Ike, there was only one night that I slept at the house when the island was under curfew. I didn't get away to get home or to get off the island. I was home, but I didn't have a home. It was not livable. So I spent the night sleeping on my back on a picnic table in the backyard. And there was no electricity on the island. And Houston was a few more miles away, and looking out towards the Gulf at night, it was profoundly beautiful, just profoundly beautiful. And in that era, they saw the stars at night because they didn't have city lights like we have. They didn't have electric lamps. They had candlelight. They had small fires. They could see the stars, and they would see so much of what happened in the sky. They would know the seasons of the moon, its coming and going. And the Hebrew calendar is a lunar calendar with 13 months. So this is seeing things in the sky is natural for them, not for us, but for them, absolutely. And in the hot summer months, they would sleep outside on the roof, much like I slept outside on a picnic table. There was no electricity. It was hot. Oh my goodness. It was unpleasant. And so we had that. So what do we know about these individuals? Okay, we know where they're from. They get this name Magi. We know that they're schooled in things that happen in the sky. The celestial bodies make sense to them in a way that it does not make sense to us. They saw something in its rising. It happened over a period of time. And they've come searching for the King of the Jews. Were these descendants of the people carried off in the deportation mentioned earlier in Matthew's gospel? Were these descendants of individuals carried off into exile who have lived hearing the prophetic words of Isaiah and others, waiting for the birth of the Christ child? It would make sense that they were. So Herod, the regional king, and Herod is king so long as the Roman emperor allows him to be king. He is a client state, if you will. He's king, but he owes that to somebody in Rome. And it's great as long as he keeps the peace. Herod does not believe, back up, Herod believes Jerusalem is not big enough for two kings. One is plenty, and he's already got that job. Herod is troubled. All Jerusalem with him is also troubled. So this is fascinating. What did they see in the sky in Jerusalem versus what was seen by the magi in Assyria, Babylon, Phoenicia, whatever we call that region beyond the Jordan? Were they the same things? But they're troubled. And it's very curious that all Jerusalem with him, I'm not so, little hyperbole maybe happening there. But what we do know is the chief priests and the scribes know what's going on. The chief priests and the scribes have enough information to know what's going on. So Herod gets them together with the chief, assembles all the chief priests and the scribes of the people. Okay, where's the Christ child to be born? You have people coming from far away, coming to worship the King of the Jews. They have seen something in the sky over time telling them it's now. This thing that has been foretold for generations, more than 700 years, it's here, it's right now at that moment, and they are not going to miss it. So they show up. Okay, picking up at verse 5. See if I can get that a little bit prettier in here. So now this is the chief priests and the scribes. Herod's asking, where's the King of the Jews going to be born? In Bethlehem of Judea, for it was written by the prophet, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. That's what's happening in Matthew's gospel. Matthew is telling us that the scribes and the chief priests have every reason to believe, well, back up. They don't have every reason, but they have good reason to believe that the Messiah has been born in their time, that this is what they should be teaching and preaching to the people. This is it. It's the moment. It is here. It is now. But that's not what happens in Matthew's gospel. They like the way things are because they're the leaders. Herod is king, chief priests, scribes, they all have defined roles, identities. And if they have to shift their identity to accommodate the king of the Jews, well, that doesn't work. And then the other part of it is the messiahs came along every few years. I mean, it was not an uncommon occurrence for someone to show up in Jerusalem and say, I am the Messiah. And that person inevitably ends up being crucified on a cross because Rome says, nope, you are not going to invoke a revolution in Jerusalem, which is how the people had come to think of it. Now, the manuscripts, the ancient text, all translated into the Septuagint at this point in time, they tell us that the virgin is going to be with child. They clearly define the prophetic expectations, and there are dozens of them throughout those manuscripts. And people come in and expect or want, that's desire, that's probably the better word, somebody to come and save them from Roman rule, to reestablish David's kingdom in Jerusalem so that it is a Jewish kingship, a Judean kingship. The kingship followed from David, and in their mind, it's a political overthrow. Herod's not going to allow that, and Rome is most certainly not going to allow that. So messiahs came along fairly often. They would be executed, and their disciples would scatter away. So there is some reason for them to think, this is just another group coming saying, they're just here to foment for some kind of tumult in the city. They're just going to try to overthrow the local government, and so they're troubled by this. They don't take time to connect to the Word of God that they're quoting, that the events are actually happening. Jerusalem is a city. Bethlehem at that point in time, not even a wide spot in the highway, so to speak. Very, very small community, handful of families that would be gathered there. And they quote this prophecy. And I want you to follow the footnotes in your Bible as I'm following mine, because this comes from the prophetic, the minor prophet Micah. In the back of the New Testament, the last 12 books, often called the Book of the 12s, they're called also minor prophets. They're minor in the sense that they're not as long as the other prophets, the major prophets and minor prophets. The distinction that was given to me years ago, to think of it, it really makes sense. Major prophets got their own scroll. Book of the 12 got one scroll they had to share. And we don't read those as much as we should, but you really should, because they are wonderful. They are honest and raw, and sometimes gritty, and sometimes uncomfortable, and sometimes life-affirming and reassuring. And here Prophet Micah gives this beautiful prophecy, and it is about Bethlehem in Judea. Bethlehem is the least among the communities in Judea. It is the least among them. For from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. In the image of shepherd, that shows up all throughout the ancient manuscripts. Certainly the prophet Isaiah has strong expectations of a shepherd. The 23rd Psalm is solidly a shepherd's psalm. He will shepherd my people Israel. So what does that mean? The shepherd is with the animals at night and during the day. The shepherd maps out a path for the animals to have food to eat. The shepherd heals their wounds. The shepherd cares for them. And when they are in town, so to speak, and in a pen, in Nazareth, there's an old city, Nazareth. It's a tourist trap. Absolutely fall into that trap if you are ever anywhere near Nazareth. Totally worth a day to go and spend it there. It's a great way to spend a day. And if you can be there for a meal, you don't want to miss that either, because they serve food with first century cooking utensils and cooking means and first century recipes, so to speak. And it's awesome. You don't want to miss it. But the idea here is they have a pen in Nazareth in this community, and there's no gate in the pen. Because when the shepherd brings in the sheep, and sheep from different shepherds will be there, the shepherd will sleep. The shepherd becomes the gate. So that makes sense when Jesus says, I am the way and the truth. I'm the way. You can't get in or out of that pen unless you go over Jesus, or a thief that comes in the backside. But the good shepherd, the sheep know his name, and shepherds will intermingle their sheep, and they don't have brands on them, which is crazy to Texans that you have unbranded. I mean, now they put tags on ears, and but you have a physical way of looking at it and going, I know that's my cow. I know that's my bull. I know that's my steer. But in that era, and today still with sheep and goats, they will know the shepherd's voice and they will come. Much like if I go outside and call my dog, or somebody left my gate open one day and my dog did not run. He went out to the front of the house and laid down in front of the garage door waiting for somebody to come let him back in. But when he hears my voice, he comes running, because he knows, I mean, I'm his person. That's my dog. That's how sheep are. They will hear the voice of their shepherd and know I belong to that one. So a shepherd can call and the sheep will come. Shepherd can count. And if one's missing, he's going to leave the 99 and go look for that one. From you, Bethlehem, the least among this area. And it's really, and you, O Bethlehem Ephratah, is more specifically how it is in Micah. You are by no means least among the clans of Judah, the families of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler, King of the Jews, who will shepherd my people. The prophetic expectation that the Messiah, Jesus Messiah, will be one to shepherd his people. This is this sentence here in Matthew's gospel, pulling from the prophet Micah, is the culmination of dozens and dozens of prophetic witnesses throughout what is today the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament, telling us that this Christ child is coming. So what happens next? Herod summoned the magi secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. Okay. So when was this child born? He then sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word that I too may come and worship him." Spoiler alert, Herod has no expectation of him, the only king in his mind in Jerusalem. He is not going to worship this king. So after listening to the king, they, the magi, went on their way. And behold, here it is, y'all look, this God's acting. The star they had seen went in its rising. It went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. They're in Jerusalem. They're looking at the star, whatever it is they saw in the sky, and it stops 5 miles south of Bethlehem over the community, 5 miles south of Jerusalem over the community of Bethlehem. And I love this verse 10. This may be one of my favorite verses in all of the Bible for so many reasons. I'm running late on time, but I'm going to take a moment here. When they saw the star, it's resting now over the place where the child was, they rejoiced joyfully with great, loud joy. There's no easy way to do the English translation of what's said here. And you don't have to be able to read Greek to see this in verse 10, but it helps. But you can see here, Korason and then Korain, that you can see the chi alpha rho. That's the root. And here it's chi alpha rho eta, chi alpha rho alpha. You can see the common root in the word. And so they rejoiced when they saw the star. That's astera. You could recognize, you can draw a star from that even if you don't read, if you just know, if you joined a fraternity or sorority in your college days and just learned enough of the Greek alphabet to know that's alpha, sigma, tau, then you can know that's astera. And but you can see the root. You don't have to read Greek to see that root there. And so that's why I say they rejoiced joyfully, megaland, greatly. Not just, I know some of you are looking at the vertical screen, so I'll do it. Not just broad, but tall. I think that gets me in the vertical screen. Not just broad, but tall. For those watching on a wider screen, not just broad and my arms go out of the screen, but tall, big, with my arms going out of the joy. They rejoiced joyfully, bigly, loudly. This was a celebration. And thank you for, I just wanted you to be able to see that. You don't have to be able to read Greek to benefit from looking at it from time to time. And there are resources, you can click on them and it'll tell you what the words are. But this is one of the verses you want to do that with. Because if you are teaching and preaching this text, you have to tell the congregation, this celebration was so big, there are no words in the English language that can be smashed together to tell you how great was their celebration. They have traveled some 900 miles. They and their forefathers have waited in exile some 4 centuries for this moment. The prophet Isaiah first talked about the birth from a virgin 750 years before this moment. And here it is, and they are there at the very pinnacle of the fullness of time of all of history, not just of human history, but of universal history. They are there at that moment. And that's a cause for party. They are celebrating rejoicing joyfully, bigly, loudly, rejoicing joyfully. Then going into the house, they saw the child. This is not an infant narrative. Jesus is a toddler. They saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and they worshiped him. I just can imagine. I mean, here in my mind, because the hymns have shaped me, the old song has shaped me. There's 3 of them, right? We don't know how many. We know there are men in the group, but there are also going to be women likely in this group as well. They fall down and worshiped him. I love sharing worship with people of other faith traditions. And there are a number of faith traditions where you go down the center aisle and you don't just take your seat. You stop and kneel. You kneel before the cross and take your seat. When you go towards the chancel, the stage, if you will, that's the churchy word for the stage in a church, the chancel. When you go forward to the chancel in these traditions, the priest, it's a priest in those traditions, does not just walk up the steps. You stop and you offer obeisance, pay obeisance is the phrase one used in particular when I was in his sanctuary. And we walked to the place, and it's an altar, not a communion table in these churches. And you bow your head and you offer reverence that you are in the presence of the Christ. That's what the Magi did. They fell down, face in the dirt, down onto the ground, and they worshiped this child. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Each of these means something special. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. You have wealth, you have kingship, and you have death, all in these gifts. But being warned in a dream, Joseph was warned in a dream, and here it is, the Magi are warned in a dream. We don't know if it was one had the dream and told the others, or they all have the same dream. We don't know. They were warned in a dream not to return to Herod. So they departed to their own country by another way. So after Christmas is over, you begin a celebration. I'm not all that far from Louisiana, from New Orleans. Galveston certainly has a great Mardi Gras tradition. And you begin now in this time of year to have a king cake. If you've not had one, you are missing out. Take cinnamon rolls and put them in a circle and decorate them with gold and purple and green, gold and frankincense and myrrh. These are your colors. And make them in a circle, because that's what the kings did. They didn't just go from, let's see how to do this. They went from, I want to make sure I try to get the directions right in the screen. So they went from the east to Jerusalem, and then they didn't go straight back. They didn't go to Jerusalem, then down to Bethlehem, back to Jerusalem to tell the king, and then straight back. No, they get there and they go back in another way. So they traveled in a circle. They went back a different way. So that's why you have king cakes all the way up through Mardi Gras, which is the Tuesday before Ash Wednesday. And that's part of the celebration there, is you remember this event with the kings. And this is where I end the text for this particular sermon or lesson. And it is, collectively, it's a fascinating story that tells us a lot. I should back up. There is a story that follows after the flight to Egypt that Herod shows up with people in Jerusalem and kills the infants. And there are some who say this event did not happen. There's not, outside of this text, there's not another source that verifies it. And I'm not at all undaunted by that, because when you go back and you study Jerusalem or Bethlehem, back up, I just totally befuddled that sentence here. Back. Herod kills the children in Bethlehem. When he realized that he'd been tricked by the wise men, he became furious. He sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem and in all that region who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he ascertained from the Magi. So we know Jesus was about 2, toddler, running around. Some will say that never happened. And I'm not among those. Yes, I get it. There's not another document outside of Scripture that verifies it. But remember how tiny Bethlehem was. Um, it was tiny, 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 tiny. When I was a kid, I was at a camp that went to visit a place called Fisher, Texas, John Knox Ranch, still in operation. And if you have kids that are of the age to go there, send them there. I know other folk who have kids that still go there. I know folk who are still counselors there. Send your kids. It's awesome. But the little town of Fisher, we'd walk however many miles down to that little town, and it was like population of 3, Mr. and Mrs. Fisher and somebody else. Now, Fisher, Texas, as it's a larger community today, it has one of the great 9-pin bowling alleys. If you're out that way, it should be on your bucket list to go. But it was a small town, and you'd see the sign, Fisher, Texas, population 3. That was, to me, coming from San Antonio, one of the 10th largest cities in the country, that was just bizarre to me. But that's what it was, population 3. Bethlehem, that was Bethlehem. That was it. And in another gospel narrative, you have people, remember they were traveling for this census, and then they're going to go back. There are not going to be many, if any, male children 2 years old and under. And if the king sends you to kill every child, male child 2 years old and under, you're not going to go back to the king and say, I didn't find any. You're going to go back and say, mission accomplished. Yes, sir. Because your life depends on that. So I am completely unfazed that there's not a text outside of this that has Herod killing the children. I have no doubt this is what happened. But put into the context of Bethlehem as it existed in that day, it makes more sense that we don't have something to verify it than the other way around. So this is what happens with the people coming to seek the Christ child. And so this is it. When you teach and preach this segment, these are the questions you want to leave people with. Are you willing to celebrate that Christmas? That's the one. It's not the Santa Claus of Coca-Cola and Hallmark and the local mall. It's the St. Nicholas, who was in a wealthy family, orphaned at a young age, gave all of his money away to other children, orphans. And he enjoyed doing that so much, he went to work, accumulated a large sum of money, and what did he do? He gave it all away again. And that was the pattern in the life of Nicholas. That's why he is Saint Nicholas, the patron saint of children. And his feast day in the Roman Catholic calendar is December 25th. Santa Claus. When my kids were of age to talk about Santa Claus, what I said to them, I say to you, I believe in Santa Claus. But it is so much bigger than anything you are imagining. Because Nicholas worshipped the Christ child. The Magi traveled some 900 miles to see that child, perhaps 2 years to get there. What did they see in the skies? Go back and find the BethlehemStar.net. There's a series of lessons and videos. He puts them out there free of charge. I still have a CD that I use. We watched that in my Wednesday Bible study last week because it just is so fascinating to me. But this is the question, isn't it? Are we going to worship like the Magi and travel and really commit our lives to seeking the Christ, the Messiah of God? Are we willing to believe these centuries of prophetic voice that told us what to expect, and the overwhelming weight of historic documents, biblical documents and non-biblical documents, that authenticate and verify the life, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus the Christ? Are we willing to believe the weight of that evidence and shape our lives accordingly? And that is the challenge that we have at Christmas time. So focused on my screens here that I've lost my cursor there. That's the challenge that we have at Christmas time. And I know this lesson has taken an hour, and I'm grateful if you are here with me even at this point of the lesson. I would be so grateful if you'd take a moment, click like on the video, smash the subscribe button. The goal is to do this every Tuesday. I know there will be occasional Tuesdays that I'm not able to do it, although I had one Tuesday morning I couldn't do it, but I was able to pre-record it and launch it on time. So it's certainly my hope and expectation to continue doing this. It's Christmas time, and I want to wish you a very Merry Christmas. I will be back online in this venue on Christmas Day. You will see me reading the Christmas story and talking about this being a good day to read through the Bible, to begin reading through the Bible. And I am so grateful for you. Grateful for those who watch the videos, grateful for those who post comments. And I'm humbled, honestly and truly humbled when I'm out and about and I see people who come up and talk to me about these videos. I'm really very grateful. I'm doing this because at this time of life with my disability, it's the most I can do to support the cause of Christ. And I'm grateful that I get to do this much. My friends, I'm David Green. This is Pastor Abilities. It's life and faith together. And thank you. And may God bless you and yours. Have a very Merry Christmas. I'll see y'all next week.